You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansell. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Product Coalition. I'm your host, Jay Stansell. Today, we have an incredible guest, Parveen Downer, joining us to discuss unlocking high performance, building teams with psychological safety. Now, Parveen is known for transforming low-performing teams into top performers, and Parveen's going to share why psychological safety is crucial, how to start practicing it, and what pitfalls to avoid. So we're going to explore how psychologically safe teams build better products and drive business success. Parveen, so good to have you on the Product Coalition podcast. Thank you for joining me, and I'm really excited to get into this topic today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Parveen, do you mind getting us going by sharing a little bit about you? What's your origin story through to this space here today in product?
Yeah, I'd love to share it. I think there's always a bit of a wiggly line into product management, at least people that I've met, and I'm no different. So I've been in product management about 6 years in practice, but 4 in like formal title. My background's in healthcare and higher education, and I've been working on building high-performing teams for over 14 years. I was trying to do the math the other day. I started in high school with volunteer groups, and now I lead girl guiding groups in Canada, where I'm from, and also here in the UK. And recently with software delivery teams at Semble here in London. So originally sort of with an operations background and moved into more of a technical and product management role recently.
I love that. And Parveen, why this topic? What is it about psychological safety that, before we get into what it's all about, why is this so meaningful to you?
Yeah, I feel like it's a topic that there's quite a lot of good information out there, but it's quite fluffy. And like, how do you actually get started using it, and why does it matter? I think it's not something that we talk about enough. When I was foraying into product management, there was so much good information, including on the Product Coalition blog, around how to do different prioritization frameworks or how to communicate with stakeholders. But actually, at the heart of doing all of those things is you're going to be leading a team, and they have to build some really cool things. So how do you get that to be a fun experience? Like, you're in stand-ups every day, for example. You're going to see these people every day, and you want to have a good time with them. So how can we make sure that they're not only paving the path for you to have a good time and understand and enjoy your work, but also for other people to do the same? So it's people that you see all the time. Let's just make it a fun place to be.
I love that. Now, psychological safety, I think, really stood out to me through Google's Project Aristotle. I remember being sort of introduced to that project and the outcomes of it back in 2012-13. And at the time, it was really, I remember the industry was all about, work hard, fast, break things, learn, move on. And the cost of relationships within the workplace, or the cost of turnover, through just maybe moving too fast, or too much haste and not enough speed, was sort of a big part of the culture, tailing off from the days of 2008 and the Facebook boom and all of those sort of build styles. Can you get us going, Parveen, by introducing, for those that haven't really stepped deeply into psychological safety before, what is it? What is it all about?
Yeah, the way I think about it is, how can you help people, including yourself, feel safe to bring their whole selves to work, to challenge ideas, to give feedback, to give ideas around solutions that maybe they're not the expert in, but without the fear of that repercussion of some sort? Like, is someone going to humiliate you, or are they going to say, oh no, that's not your area of expertise, move on, and make you feel like less than yourself to actually say what you think? So in simple terms, it's being able to bring your whole self and your thoughts and your ideas to a situation, to a team, to work, and not feel like you're going to be reprimanded in some way for doing that.
Nice, nice. So, with this new series of live stream events and podcasts, I've been introducing a parody for every episode.
Okay.
Now, with what you've just said there, this fake sponsor is all about completely abolishing anything to do with psychological safety.
Okay.
And as a parody, I hope you enjoy this, and it gives you a smile. Here we go. Here's what not to do for psychological safety.
Welcome to Unlocking High-Performance Building Teams with Psychological Safety. Today we're diving into the world of psychological safety, but with a twist. Ready to turn your team into a high-performing disaster? Let's go. First, forget about mutual respect. Who needs it? Interrupt your teammates constantly. Nothing says team spirit like talking over each other in meetings. And remember, sarcasm is your best friend. Oh, you think that's a good idea? Sure, Jan. Next, make sure to blame individuals for mistakes. Accountability is overrated. Point fingers and watch your team crumble under pressure. It's a great way to keep everyone on their toes and on edge. Don't forget to keep secrets. Transparency? Keep your team guessing about company goals and their roles. Ambiguity is the spice of life, right? And lastly, discourage any form of feedback. Constructive criticism, more like destructive criticism. Make sure everyone knows their ideas are terrible and will never see the light of day. So there you have it. Follow these tips and you'll have a team that's not just low performing, but spectacularly dysfunctional. Tune in next time for more tips on how not to build a high performing team. Until then, keep those psychological barriers high and those team spirits low.
Oh man, ambiguity is the spice of life is my favorite line out of that whole thing.
That's worthy of a tattoo somewhere in the world. I'm sure. So there was lots in there, hopefully that touches on the worst of practices, Parveen, from your perspective. But bringing it back to a more serious note, why does this matter?
Yeah, I think in my experience in tech specifically, there's always so much pressure to deliver, and I'm sure this is true across many different industries. But because there's such high stakes involved a lot of the time, you've got investors who are pressuring you to deliver. You've got users who are like, "Hey, we like your software, but also we hate your software." You're getting this feedback all the time of things that just need to be better and change, and you need to move at pace. So if you don't have teams that are delivering at a pace that's keeping up with the business needs, with the user needs, how can you have a really truly successful business? And I think it's not just throwing different priorities and changing those priorities that really stifles teams. It's actually them not being able to work together to get that solution out the door and to collaborate on that design up front and even in the discovery. So if you can't have a team that can within themselves as a unit move at pace with some velocity, it doesn't matter if you've got the most interesting problem in the world and like the best plan and strategy to solve that problem, if at the end of the day that solution isn't getting built.
Understood. So a lot of the language you're using here is about the team and setting up an environment to establish this. I want to talk about that a little bit more, but before I do, what are some of the considerations individuals need to bring in terms of attitude and mindset and awareness when we're talking about psychological safety?
Yeah, I guess the attitude is first acknowledging that this is something that needs to change within the team, that this actually isn't the most safe place for people to actually participate and bring their best selves. And I think that when I say that you need to acknowledge it, what I mean is if you were to ask people on your team, do they enjoy when we're in, let's say, a refinement session, if you're talking about, agile ceremonies, or when they're presenting their work in a review time, do they feel confident that and proud of the work that they're doing and how they're portrayed? Or maybe even there's something about their personal brand and how people perceive you in the business. And that's not to make people feel, insecure about who they are, but what is the reputation that precedes them? And if the answer to those questions are things like you're not very proud, you're not very confident, or no, I don't enjoy going to meetings, then it's acknowledging why is that the case, and then trying to move into this notion of figuring out how to build a psychologically safe team. What is unsafe at the moment? And when I say unsafe, I don't mean like someone's physically throwing a rock at you. I hope that's not the case for anyone, but rather in a really high pressurized environment where you're being told you have 5 different priorities. You've got to prioritize the best thing. Okay, now we've prioritized it and we've got a solution to build. How do you then move forward as a team to choose what that best solution is and the how you're going to do it? And so, there's acknowledging that you need to do something in the first place, I think, is the hardest thing to do. But once you've done that, the rest of the things can get easier because there's a lot of great information out there about how then to think about and bring this to light. And so I think the second thing I would say is, how do you think about your language that you're bringing to these conversations? I think a lot of the time the language can focus on like, you are doing this wrong. You are doing, you're putting it on other people that they're not doing the right thing, or that they're not being clear, or that they have silly ideas. And that's not a way to go per the video, talk over people and tell them their ideas are stupid. That's the perfect way to really not have this take off. So trying to change the language to be more about you, in the sense of, okay, I don't understand this thing. Help me understand, or tell me more about that. I'm not clear on what you're saying. It's not saying you're not clear. It's saying I'm not understanding and I'm not clear. And that language shift makes such a big difference in starting these conversations and building that safety.
I love your perspective here that is all about taking accountability yourself and for your own behaviors and your own interpretations of others' behaviors, as opposed to just disliking the behaviors of others, working out what is it and why that you dislike there. Parveen, do you mind jumping into some tangible examples of instilling psychological safety in the team? We've spoken a little bit there about some of the things that individuals may feel that is part of why the environment doesn't feel safe. But what are some of the real examples that can be used to create a psychologically safe team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of times one of my biggest gripes when I read about and listen to podcasts about psychological safety, I was like, but how do I do it? So I've come up with a list of things that I use in my everyday sort of practice, both professionally and personally, that really help me, I guess, build that safety. And doing this consistently will help people build trust with you, and then you also, will build trust with them. So one of the things that I do a lot, especially when we're in solution mode, we're trying to figure out what's the best way forward. We understand the problem space. We're in a workshop. We're trying to figure out what to build. So when someone says something, maybe they haven't drawn it, maybe they've said it, and I don't understand what they're saying, it's like, okay, here's what I heard, and I'll summarize that as plainly, without emotion as possible. And then, am I understanding this correctly, is the end of that. Because sometimes people don't feel like they can correct you if you're in a place of more seniority, let's say, or if you're perhaps, I have a lot of people I've worked with who are engineers in the past who are like, oh, well, the product manager is the be all, end all, and of decision making, and that's it. Versus, am I understanding this correctly, invites that questioning, and that, oh, actually, no, maybe I can correct you, or everything is fine, and that's good. So that's one thing that I found really helpful. Am I understanding this correctly? Again, you're putting the focus on you and accountability. The second thing that I found really helpful is to just call out what's going to happen in that situation. For example, we aren't going to get this right on the first time, and that's okay. So be that, if we're in an agile development situation and we're starting to work on a new part of a feature, trying to get the developers to think like, oh, this doesn't have to be perfect to start with. Like, it's not going to be right, and that's okay. We will feedback. We've got systems in place to help us get to that really good end space. And that's okay for me is the key part of that one. I've got a couple more for you. So This one I think is really helpful when you're trying to genuinely elicit feedback or input from people. Instead of just saying like, what do you think? You could say, I need your input here. Like, you've got this expertise and this perspective that I don't have. I need your input. And that has been so game changing for me. Like, for example, I was talking about building this new feature that we were looking at in Stemble, which is a healthcare software. Excuse me. And I didn't quite understand from a technical standpoint what the best approach was to this solution. We have a sort of back end part and a front end part. And I think a lot of times earlier on in my product career, I'd be like, oh, the devs are going to know that I'm a fraud because I don't know all these tech things. But actually, it's not my job to know those things. It's their job to do that. So actually just going to them and be like, I need your input here. I'm not sure how to solve this problem. What are your thoughts? And that has had such a difference in the response I get from what do you think? And what do you think usually elicits a, oh, well, we could do it this way or that way, but I don't really care. Versus I need your input. They're like, okay, well, here's how I think we could do it. It's more proactive, more on the front foot. So those phrases have really helped me in my career.
This is really valuable, Parveen. Thank you for sharing so many points there. When I was researching today's show, I discovered a Gallup study that found organizations with high psychological safety have 27% lower turnover rates, 12% higher productivity, and 40% fewer safety incidents. And so the numbers really stand out here in terms of like impact psychologically safe environments have for people. Can I ask, what are some of the ways that you recommend people implement measuring psychological safety in the environment? Is that qualitative, quantitative? Is there tools, or is it discussions? How do you get started to know where you're at? What's your baseline?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's going to be quite different for different teams, I think, depending on how they operate. But in my experience, I lean quite heavily on my delivery manager to help facilitate these discussions with the teams and things like retrospectives or team working agreements. So we might have a question that's posed to the whole team, including myself, that might be, for example, I feel like my thoughts and ideas are heard when they're brought up, or I feel like I'm involved in the decision making when we're working as a team. And I think there's a lot of these really good questions. I think there's actually templates. It's on Miro, I think, that it's like team working agreements. Like, how are we going to work together? So it's not just okay, we're going to use this environment to test, and this is how we do code review. Those things matter as well. But how are we going to work together? Like, for example, we always know we start stand up at the same time every day. We are going to start on time. You know where we are. You've got the links. We're not going to wait for you. And that's not to say like, oh, we don't think your life isn't important, but we all value each other's time and we'll start on time. Or when we're in a workshop and people, actually even before a workshop, we've agreed as a team that all the engineers are invited to join in on our research. So can they actually hear from the users themselves what the problem is? And they are invited to ask questions. Of course, we've got frameworks for, not asking leading questions and things like that, but actually getting involved further upstream rather than just, okay, here's the tickets, they're perfectly written, off you go and build. And I found that it really helps get a higher quality of output because people are involved so early. So there's the qualitative asking things in retrospective team working agreements. But I think there is something quantitative that could be measured if you're already measuring output. Like, for example, do you have less escaped defects? Is it just better quality code that's going out? Or could you measure velocity? Okay, before we used to deliver this many tickets or this many story points in this time frame, and now we're doing more. And then why? Like, reflect back. Is it because people are, we come up with a really solid solution in the first place without lots of circular conversations and argument? Is it because actually you just understand the problem more, so you're able to problem solve a bit more for yourself rather than referring back to design, research, and product for every small question? So there's a few things you can do. I'm sure there's more than that, but that's what comes to mind right now.
Nice. When I think about the structure of teams in product discovery and delivery. They're very cross-functional. So similarly, Parveen, where is the best place to start if you want to take this seriously, knowing you may have an engineering team, a design team, a product management team, and an executive team, and there is sort of a team of teams that gets things done as well? Is it about starting within the individual sort of silos, such as engineering or product, or starting with the cross-functional group first? Which one is the right place to start thinking about this if you can't drive it from the top down across the whole organization from day one?
Yeah, there's probably a million and one places to start. Putting my product hat on, I think, where can you do this in the sort of smallest iteration quickest? And to me, that's stand up. If you're in stand up every day with the same people, you know each other well enough that hopefully there's enough trust there that you can start this. And you do it every day, and it's not a long meeting either, right? Anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, whatever it is people do. And that's where I started. And I found the most success because I was able to iterate on it really quickly. Like, oh, I tried this phrase yesterday, it didn't work. Let me try it differently tomorrow. And then actually bringing it up in things like retro, where you have a bit more breathing room to talk, is like, so how have you felt the last 2 weeks? What's changed? And actually just getting curious about how it's working. I think that's a really good place to start. Yeah, you can absolutely start in the silos. That's fine. But the point is that it's the team that you're working with that you're trying to build that safety with. So if you work really closely with just within the engineering team, that's a great place to start. If you work really closely cross-functionally, then that's a great place to start. I would say it's where you have the most interaction with your team. That's where you're going to see the biggest benefit.
Nice. I think what's really important here is that the individual contributors have to be thinking about this as well. This isn't a management problem, management solution. It will just come down to as everyone contributes to improving the psychological safety. It's not a thing that's done for you and you get to enjoy the benefits of. It's a thing you need to participate in order to enjoy the benefits of.
Definitely.
Can I ask, Parveen, you're in an incredibly diverse city of London there. What role have you seen that culture comes into? And by culture, I don't mean the culture of the company, but the cultures of individuals. When you've got differing cultures, different backgrounds, and all of those come with then unique biases. Where does culture impact either psychological safety positively or negatively? And how can culture be used to improve psychological safety?
That is a great question. We actually, as a product team at Zenble, was it about 4 or 5 months ago, we did this, it's a test on Harvard Business Review. I can't remember the name. I think it's just called like culture indication, something like that. I'll find the link and put it in the show notes because it was a very useful exercise to do, whereby each individual will fill in a series of questions on a scale of 0 to 10 to say, okay, how do you prefer to communicate? Is it more through visuals or is it more through, let's say, verbal? And there's a whole host of these types of questions. And at the end of it, you get this score of sort of where you fall on this culture spectrum. So like you said, not company culture, but culture more of like depending on what country you're from or what kind of upbringing you've had. And that then informs how you show up in the workplace. And it was really interesting because our team is fabulously diverse. We've got, people from France, from the UK, we've got Canada, the US, and then all different cultural backgrounds and heritage from that as well. And actually knowing those things going into more collaborative sessions has really helped be like, oh, actually this person much prefers visuals because it helps them understand this concept more easily than if I'm just saying, like an epic poem of an explanation. Another thing could be sort of how people deal with conflict. Like, do you prefer to have that really direct feedback? And is it okay to do it in an open space versus do you prefer it in writing privately? And I think keeping all those factors in mind, this is why it's not an easy thing to row the boat towards, is because people are so different, even if they're from the same culture or same country. their preferences are going to change. So actually knowing that up front will help you mold what does psychological safety look like for your team, and how do you achieve that differently with different personalities. So I cannot remember the name of that test. I'll definitely send it to you though.
Nice, nice. It's certainly something that stood out to me recently. I was doing some analysis. Find Your Grind, the business I spend most of my week on. We have a high fives channel in Slack. And the pattern I noticed was not only the quantity of high five shout outs, appreciation, but also the depth of them was far different for our US team members than it was from the UK team members. And when I was looking at this, I was like, is it just the UK just not wanting to recognize or not recognizing and high-fiving as much? But actually, when I spoke to the team, and I think this was the important learning for me, was actually have a conversation about culture with both American and British team members. It's like, do you guys see this, and why do we think this is? And the discussion came out that really it was about culture. It was the British team members were just being quite British and not wanting to celebrate sort of anything that was, I don't know, in the 75th percentile and below in terms of achievement. It was only really the outliers that were really above and beyond, then they would give the shout outs. Whereas in the American style, it was sort of anything in the 50th percentile and above got promoted. And that really was quite interesting for me, because then we could have a conversation around, why does shout outs are important for the culture of the company and for the safety and recognition of others, but also how does it come across as sincere? Because for the British team, they didn't want to be doing shout outs for these average things that they felt were part of people's jobs, and there was just this cultural difference. And having a conversation with the leadership team, we took away a clear understanding of each other, which I believe and hope that created a safer psychological environment for the team members.
That's a really good explanation of the culture difference of like what you celebrate, the 50th percentile and above versus 75. Having been in both cultures, both in North America and UK, that absolutely does reign true. And I think, at our company, we also do have a shout outs channel, and even within the company, you see there's usually more shout outs from more commercial teams who tend to be a bit more, forward facing and outgoing, versus tech teams who are usually a bit more reserved. These are general. It's not to say everybody is that way, but it's interesting to see that difference of like, is it just you doing your job and you did it well, or did you go above and beyond? Like, when is it worth shouting out? And it's important to shout out. Yeah, I love that observation. I'm definitely going to bank that.
Parveen, bringing psychological safety changes into the environment, like any change management, can introduce new risks. So I'm keen to hear from you. What can go wrong when experimenting with psychological safety changes?
Yes, plenty of things can go wrong, not to scare people, but it does need to be a very intentional move towards this way of thinking and this way of working. I think if there's sort of like, you use some of the phrases I shared earlier, but then you don't actually listen, like there isn't that active listening, then this can really go wrong, because you're kind of inviting people to share their ideas, their thoughts themselves, and then you're not actually listening to them. Are they going to feel like they want to keep doing that? No. So you're sort of going to have a false start, if you will, if you don't actually listen. I think as well as it shouldn't just be one person who's trying to, bring this to the company. It's really going to be an uphill battle, because there's a lot of thinking involved in this. Of course, there's a lot of thinking involved in all of our jobs as it is. You're constantly prioritizing, communicating, trying to influence people. But then you're also like this meta thinking of, okay, this person learns this way, or this is the culture of this person. How can I blend what I know about those people and then help create a safe space for them? So actually having at least one more person to help collaborate with and to have a bit of a strategy around it, I've found is really helpful. So like I said, in the past, for me, a delivery manager has been absolutely brilliant collaborator to really get this off the ground with the teams that I've worked with. But even outside of my product teams, I think, working with your VP of products, your managers, to help, if you identify this and bring this as almost an initiative, like I don't know if it's necessarily something you can measure KPIs on in an easy way. I think having someone really support the notion of bringing this to the team, or maybe they're already on board and they're trying to do it more and instill it in the team as well, I think can be helpful. But yeah, having a partner in crime absolutely is helpful. Trying to do it by yourself will be tough. And then you might not want to do it anymore and just abandon the plan altogether. So I think those are things that can go wrong.
Can I ask, is there a difference between things that can go wrong for a leader versus an individual? And what is the difference of approach between an individual contributor and a leader when it comes to trying to live the virtues and values of a psychologically safe environment?
I think that there's two things. Like if you're a leader, you have the added, I guess it's both an ability and a burden of authority. Like you can tell people and put them in their place a bit more if that's, not that that's necessarily a psychologically safe thing to do, but sometimes it's necessary. But if you're an individual contributor, you don't always have that authority, and people can, I think, more easily write you off. I mean, I've not seen this firsthand. I haven't been an individual contributor in a long time, but I think it's more about your personal brand. I think is more at stake if you're an individual contributor, because that's what you use to influence people and use that as an authority point to get people to get on side with what you're trying to do. Versus if you're a leader, there's kind of automatically that clout that's given to you to then just, use as you need to. Like, oh, well, like the CTO's walked in the room, we have to listen. And, oh, they said to jump 3 feet, so I'm going to jump 3 feet. Versus if there's some individual contributor who's, not got that authority and they're like, hey guys, we're going to jump 3 feet. And people are like, I don't really feel like it today. That's not the best analogy, but I'm just trying to get the point across of how people perceive those people, as in like maybe followers perceiving leaders is slightly different. And I think if it doesn't come from a genuine place of wanting to instill the psychological safety, if more of like, oh, I just want you guys to work faster, if it's not coming from a genuine place of this needs to be a better place to work, then I think that can fall quite flat for both ICs and leaders.
Nice. Let's bring the conversation to commercials next, Parveen. All of this is hopefully driving more successful commercial outcomes. So my question is, how can psychologically safe teams build better products and help the business achieve their goals and metrics?
Yeah, I think there's 3 ways that this can really come about. The first one I've already mentioned is about pacing. Like if your teams aren't moving at pace, whatever that means for your business, they're inherently not releasing things in an efficient fashion, and you're losing out on your market share, on revenue, on opportunities, because you don't have, let's say, those features or those problems solved in your product. So that is, to me, a very obvious one, but maybe not something a lot of people think about, perhaps, when they're thinking about psychological safety, because it does sound a bit fluffy and fruity, and you're like, okay, well, is this worth doing? In my experience, it absolutely is, because your teams will move faster, and ultimately, isn't that what the business wants? We want all these things yesterday. The second thing, like commercially, why it's important is because it's very easy for especially product managers to kind of go down a route of like, this is the solution. This is the thing that's going to like be the big impactful change. But if you don't get input, I think, from other people around the business, not just engineering, but also, let's say, commercial teams, and actually include them in that discovery and solution state, then you're at risk of not building the best solution for the business and users. Of course, you don't want to have sort of design by committee, but not actually getting input from people around the business you might actually come across like, okay, we've launched this feature, and someone, let's say in a product review or 2 weeks down the line, are like, oh, wouldn't it have been great if you did this extra thing? And it's like, well, if we just included them in the beginning, this actually, yeah, that is a great idea. Yes, it would have boosted our engagement metrics by 20%, or yes, we could have sold to a different market if we had made this one small change. And you miss out on those opportunities. So involving more people, I think, broadens the opportunity of the solution you're building. And then the last thing I think that it does commercially is, and this is more business focused, you mentioned some of the research that you looked into before this call about how there's lower turnover on teams. Like, it is so expensive to hire. You're taking time out from like very expensive people's times, like their day, to interview, to come up with the questions, to evaluate, to debrief. And then you've got all that time actually training people afterwards. So if you just actually keep the people who are really, really great and they're driving these psychologically safe teams, they're going to want to stay because it's a fun, engaging place to work. So you don't have to worry too much about the hiring. Of course, there's always going to be some turnover, but don't you want people to stay and not have to worry about hiring? Like, no one likes reading CVs. No one wants to write a cover letter. So why put yourself in a position to do it if you can actually just focus a bit more upstream on that experience for employees and keep them really happy?
Nice. I think, what hearing you say that, what's going through my head is that when you get this right, it's a vaccine against bad, psychological changes in the organization, but it's also can be used as a cure to resolving unsafe psychological environments as well. And I think that's really, for me, where the magic of it lies. Parveen, could you give me what does the rainbows and unicorns world of, if you were to walk into an office tomorrow, could you describe, as you're going through the ceremonies of a week in a new role, what would an awesome psychologically safe environment look like Monday to Friday if you were starting a new role tomorrow?
Ooh, I like this question. I like it. So I suppose the first thing you're going to start with, I'll just go through like what my schedule looks like. So stand up is the first thing you're probably going to be introduced to the team. So people actually say hello and welcome. It's such a simple thing, but not just carrying on as if you're not there and like, oh, they'll figure it out eventually. Like, just like say hi. It's such a nice way to feel like, oh yes, you acknowledged I'm here and I am part of the team. And for me, one thing that's super important is humor. If we're not having a bit of like fun, respectful banter, I find it really difficult to work with teams that don't have a good sense of humor. And of course, it's something you build over time, and that trust that you can be, have that sense of humor with each other. But just a good joke goes a long way. Not taking yourselves too seriously. I think there's also an element of not bringing heated emotions to a discussion or an argument that doesn't need, like, I don't think there's really a need for that kind of approach to a conversation in a psychologically safe team. Like, we're talking more from facts rather than emotion. So for example, in a retrospective, when we're like, oh, there was this breakdown in communication, and it's not pointing the finger, blaming someone. It's like, how did this happen in the first place? And what have we learned so we can make sure it doesn't happen again? So talking about it from facts, not from emotion. So it's not this sort of like heated finger pointing exercise, but rather okay, this didn't go well. We acknowledge that. Here's what the impact was, and here's how we're going to change it. So that really pragmatic approach. And I guess the last thing that I'll sort of wrap up on this question is, in, like, let's say a review time, if people are like a sprint review where you're presenting your work and what you've done, if people are talking about that work, like, first of all, they understand the problem space really well because they've been involved more upstream. They really get why this is an important piece of work. But two, they're really proud of it. I think that's a really good sign of a psychologically safe team. It's like, look, I've built this. This is solving the problem. We still have more to do. Of course, we're going to iterate, but I'm really proud of where we got to with this. I think that's a brilliant sign.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Parveen, this has been an awesome discussion. Time has really flown. Thank you so much for bringing this discussion and this topic to the Product Coalition podcast. I really appreciate your input, your expertise, and your wisdom, as well as some of the tactical advice you've brought today for the audience. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for the audience for listening as well. I hope you've enjoyed this session with myself and Parveen Downer. If you'd like to know more about Product Coalition, please head over to productcoalition.com where you can find out all about us. Until the next episode, thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.